Hi. In this video here, I'm going to talk about two concepts, or one concept that leads to another concept that you are not familiar with. Okay? So the first one I'm going to talk about is the one that you are familiar with. I'm going to talk about distance. So if I say that I'm going to go from point A to point B, then from point B to point C, and this is 3 meters and this is 4 meters, it's not drawn to scale, so I'll make this 13. Okay? So basically, the distance that I traveled is just 17 meters, and that's the end of the story, right? So distance is very straightforward. It's a scalar quantity. Scalar meaning like it doesn't care about which way I go. It just cares about how much of the amount that I do. Okay. Speed is very simple. It's just basically your distance over time. And I'm going to talk about average speed here. So when I talk about average speed, I call it V, okay, with a bar over it. And that's basically your total distance traveled over the total time of travel. Okay. So now, this distance here is basically 17 meters. Let's say it took me 2 seconds to go from point A to point C, passing through point B, and that's pretty much my speed. So I covered, on average, I covered 8.5 meters every second. It doesn't mean that every second I cover 8.5, on average. Okay? Instantaneous speed or velocity is a different story, different thing we'll talk about another time. Now, I could have covered these 13 meters in a second and a half, and I could have covered these 4 meters in half a second, or I could have covered these 13 meters in, I don't know, 1.6 seconds, and the 4 meters in the remaining time. So that's average speed. Now, when dealing with average speed, you have to take rest into account, meaning like if the time just passes, you have to take that time that you are not walking or driving into account. So for instance, let's say I go 13 meters, let's say in 5 seconds. Okay, I come to point B and I stop. And I stop for, let's say, 2 seconds. And I go from B to C, and let's say it takes me 2 seconds to do that. Now, if I want to find my average speed, I have to take these 2 seconds into account. So it's 5, 2, and 2, so that's 9 seconds. Okay? And then you would do the math here and get what you get. Okay? So average speed, distance, those are pretty straightforward. Now, let's talk about the new idea. Now, the first one is displacement. And I'll write it with D with an arrow over it, and I'll explain why the arrow. Displacement is basically the shortest distance, or the shortest line between point A and point C. Is this distance here. Now, I'm not going to be able to find that because this is not a right triangle, right? So we're not going to concern ourselves too much with this year, but the bottom line is this is your displacement. So instead of doing this in 2 dimensions, I'm going to try to do this. Now, if I had a right triangle, I could probably figure out the distance. That should be easy. If this is 4 meters, I can figure out this distance here by doing the Pythagorean theorem, right? Okay. Now, for this year, we're just going to do displacement in 1 dimension, meaning like right, left, or up and down, nothing else. So for instance, let's say I go from point A to point B to point C, and then I come back to point D, and I end up at point D eventually. So basically I do this, okay, and I come back here. And let's say this is 5 meters, this is 7 meters, and this is maybe 2 meters. Okay. Now, my displacement. Okay. Now we can set an origin. Okay. So I'm going to set this as my origin, my starting point, but just for convenience. So I'm going to say this is like 0, and I'm going to look at this all these points are being sitting on a number line. Okay. So basically, this point B is at position 5 meters. This point C is at position 12 meters. position, because I went back, so it's at position 10 meters. Okay, so the displacement, okay, is basically positive 10 meters. It's basically how far you are from your starting point. Now, if you don't see that, you can try it this way. Each time you go right, you look at the right as positive. So it's a positive 5, then I did a positive 7, and then I did a negative 2. I went backwards. So if you do the math there, you should get a positive 10 meters. That's pretty much what displacement is. Okay, it's just your position with respect to an initial position. Okay. Now, if I want to find the average velocity, okay, and here I put the arrow on it because the direction does matter. This 2 meters is not going forward; it's going backwards. So if I want to find the distance, okay, before I talk, let me talk about velocity. Velocity, or average velocity, is your displacement over time. So my displacement is positive 10, and divide by how much time it took me to go back to here. Let's say it took 5 seconds, so that's 2 meters per second. Okay. Now, when it comes to distance, the distance here is different. Okay, and average speed is different. Distance, I did 5, 7, and 2. I do not look at that as a negative 2. I did 14 meters. And it took me 5 seconds to do that, and I can do the math. I'm sorry, the distance is 14 meters. So the velocity is basically 14 divided by 5, and I do the math. Okay. So that's the difference between the two. Okay? So I did that. I gave you some examples. Okay. So now let's take a car A, and this is something for you guys to try. Car B. This one starts here. I'm going to pick this as the origin. No reason. I just decided to pick that as the origin, right? And let's say this guy here is at position 20 meters away. This car is going to go to the right. This guy is going to go to the left. Now, each time we go right, we'll look at that as a positive velocity. Each time we go left, we'll look at that as a negative velocity. So I'm going to say this guy is going at 2 meters per second, and I'm going to make this guy go at a speed, not velocity, of, 7 meters per second. Yeah, I'll even change this. I'll make this 50 meters. Let's make it more exciting. Okay? And the question that I want to know is where, if this is a number line, and this is the 0, and the negatives are to the left of it, and the positives are to the right, where and when are they going to meet? Okay? So you have to answer that question, find ways to come up with the answer. We'll talk about it in class, and we'll look at all the options. Okay? Thank you. See you later.